it has to have a proper plan for sure in terms of financial planning.
Right.
Lot of we enter science, but as a business, because I used to own a business before, so as a business, financial planning is something that becomes very key.
Thanks, Parth, for coming and talking to us about data analytics, digitization, and how to manage, especially from an entrepreneur, early startup perspective. So thank you for coming. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. And then by background, I'm a chemical engineer by background. Then I went ahead and did a PhD in biochemistry, biochemical engineering area. And I did it in New York. And then I moved back to Bangalore 5 years back. So I was there in the US working at various biotech companies. And so I'm like a biologics person for the last 20 years. So then here in Biocon, I came as a leading quality control for Biologics for all their facilities, and then moved into various roles, now more working on excellence, business excellence for Biocon Biologics, Biocon Limited, and Syngene, as for the Biocon Group companies. So during my second role here, I was in the first role and second role, I was working on a lot of digitalization efforts. And that's when Naren was in R&D and I was in QC. So we were like close buddies and working on a lot of, synergies in terms of how we manage data in Biocon. And it was mainly paper-based when I got in, and I'm sure when he was there as well. And then we had implemented several digital solutions. So, before, I kind of, probably will be able to suggest something. I'm sure you all know, mainly through, experience, what could be the solutions and etc. And based on what I'm hearing from Vaibhav for thermostable, formulations, I'm sure you will have to do a lot of stability studies at different conditions, you'll be looking at different, environments for the protein, and all of that, correct? So you'll be having data related to different conditions and etc. And do you also manufacture? I assume you're manufacturing as well, right? So you will have manufacturing data as well.
Yes, the formulation level manufacturing, DP manufacturing, we are doing. Yes.
Or
at a very small scale. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so basically you get the DS from somebody else.
Yes. Yeah. We are currently not focusing on DS production because it itself is a big task,
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So formulation is what you're working on for stability.
Right.
Okay. And with respect to Chitra, and then that's, I lost a little bit, you mentioned you were working on, Naren mentioned Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And before that, you were saying something, you were consulting, you were doing some work, but what kind of data do you deal with, Chitra?
A lot of pathogen sequencing data.
Pathogen sequencing as well.
Yeah, and also a lot of metagenomic data. So basically, I try to identify using sequencing pathogens that are present in samples, clinical samples usually. And in one of my roles, like the consulting work that I'm doing with the Gates Foundation, I'm actually helping with their index program, and which has a quality vertical. So this is really useful for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Tanay, who joined, Tanay, maybe you can introduce yourself and the kind of data that you are generating.
Sure. Hi, Parth. Glad to meet you. So I'm working in the gene silencing therapies, particularly in context of wound healing in diabetic patients as well as AMR infections. So basically, we are into topical delivery of siRNAs and antisense oligos. Mainly, we use data while designing the drug. So when we start with a large transcriptome data sets and we see that there are certain genes which are harmful in certain disease condition, and then we start on designing that, okay, which part of the mRNA we should be targeting to downregulate those particular gene. That's when the bit of a bioinformatics we use. But post that, we go towards synthesizing these molecules chemically and making the formulations, and a lot of animal studies, preclinical and in vitro studies we have. So those data currently we are, still saving just like an academic lab, because that's what we are trained for. I know that ELN is something where everybody is moving towards. So yeah, we do not have much experience in that area.
Understood. I guess electronic lab notebooks or ELN that you just mentioned will be a very good solution for, I guess, laboratory work, right? You can create your protocols, and that is something that Naren and I, implemented here in Biocon. And obviously, there are several kind of vendors that offer with different variety of functions, up till some offer more digital with data analytics and all that. Some offer a basic, electronic notebook kind of facilities. So there are companies like laboratory information systems, that you can, get, kind of companies like Labware. We had evaluated. There are some Indian-based companies also, something called Caliber, and then there is other LIMS companies like Viva also had several. It all depends on your budget. It comes back to at what stage you are in the progression of your company, and what is the budget that you have. Even when I was at Coherus, my previous company, which was a startup, and we were dealing with stability data, like what Vaibhav, you were talking about. So we were filing a BLA, and the data that we had to gather, and then we're actually a contract laboratory to test. It was a virtual startup. So then we were getting data for batch release, everything in a single certificate of analysis. And it would be kind of PDF, or maybe if we require, and then we would not, so we will have to kind of enter it back here. And it was in Excel, everything. That's what we were maintaining. And again, you will have to spend some time in compliance, for transcription and all of those. So so then we were working with a small company there to see we can implement any laboratory information systems, so that we can maybe give a license to the contract lab, and we can have the main license, and they can directly enter the data into, that are more, we own that, but, give them access to direct entry, so they will enter. But the main reason was to do some trending, some data analysis. And when you look at stability data, you'll want to look at degradation, profiles, stability, conditions, and etc. And so all of those, I'm sure you use some data analytics tool as well once you gather the data, correct? And when you choose any of these kind of vendors, again, data storage becomes a question. So there are a lot of vendors available for laboratory information management systems or electronic lab notebooks. All of those are available. But then one of the questions they will ask is, do you need to be on-premise, or it's a cloud-based solution? So if you're wealthy enough and you can, get into on-premise, that means you need to buy servers, you need to buy all the physical equipment, you need to have people in your company to maintain, those and all that. Then you can choose for on-premise. But I guess at the startup stage, rather you will go for, try out the cloud services. Like there are several cloud services that is available, like Amazon or Microsoft are, two big ones, right? So they can offer different ranges. For startup companies, cloud services doesn't ring a bell currently which company that had used in Coherus, but there are several companies available for cloud services. But again, in terms of cloud services, you will have to look at what are the recurring charges, right, on a continuous basis for maintenance of the data or pulling the data and working with the data. So you'll have to negotiate all of those with different service providers, and based on the data, because the large Amazon and enterprise solutions that they will probably want a lot of data, a lot more commitment from each company. But there are smaller companies that offer as well. I do have some contacts from Viva, from some open source. All of these companies, I do have contacts I can share with you, at some time if you're really interested. But the database that you maintain, right? First of all, probably you'll be maintaining some Excel databases. Am I correct? Mostly the data will probably in Microsoft Excel currently, right? So converting that into a more robust system is probably what you're looking for, so that you can have some validated data to pull, immediately when it is needed for a submission or some data analytics that you want to do. So you can start with electronic lab notebook, and that will also document what kind of experiments you did for long term. And there will be some digital signature, and it'll be step by step. You can monitor what is happening in your experiments and all that. And that comes with some cloud services that can store the data and then access the data. So all of that you can get some from vendors. And also, in fact, Naren has nice solutions as well, himself working with SymphonyTech. So you can even, we were actually evaluating that as well for data analytics, and what kind of solutions Naren's and his, brother-in-law, they're working on, Ravi is working on, and those are also you can evaluate what kind of solution that you are looking for. And for that, is that solution feasible? And it has to be case by case basis, because there are a lot of solutions available, but then you will have to evaluate. Budget is one consideration, and your future. So for example, obviously you're all looking very positively, and once the animal studies are done, and you will probably go into phase 1 clinical study, Tanay, right? And then you will want to progress in that path of submission and getting the product approved. So long term, you should also look at scalability, so that maybe you can stick with one vendor, right? So all that you might want to kind of negotiate. And can you then change at a future state from a cloud services to an on-premise if needed, if that switch is possible or not? Different vendors offer different kind of terms and conditions. And slowly you can also data security comes into picture, right? So for example, if it's an Excel file, probably any of your employees can pull it down and send it through email, and then you will lose that proprietary nature of your data. So I know we trust everybody, but sometimes, they are just mad at a manager and then they will do stuff. Okay. So therefore, data security is very important. And when you opt for these solutions, they have different security features that they offer. But if you do keep it within your own, computers and all that, that security is not that great, right? So I'm sure you can all have Mac computers and you can have password locks and all that. But still, somebody can pull in the data and then, use it for a wrong reason. So, and how do you communicate, how do you transfer this data to another person? And that is also something that you need to look into, because there is pros and cons. If you have any solution, you would want to, nowadays, I think all of them are able to provide Excel file or a PDF or one sort of downloading the data that. So the vendor, with the vendor, you also want to check what kind of data format are they willing to provide as a download. It cannot be in any unique format. It has to be a generic format that will be useful for communication. For example, you want to send it to Naren to have a look from his side and give some expert opinion from his. So he should be able to open it in his laptop. These are all basic things, but sometimes we miss them, at the end, then we struggle later. So that is why I'm like trying to, pinpoint. And so like I mentioned, license considerations will also be there. Some offer, named licenses, some offer concurrent licenses. So concurrent means, multiple people can use the same license. Named means it's on one named user. So that is also something you want to look into. How many users do you have in your company? If it's your startup, depends on it is a single digit or it's a double digit kind of startup, people. What do you need? How many access do you need? Based on that also you want to think through and talk about scalability as well. And if a solution that you want to go for now is not scalable, then is it sufficient? Because your investment also will be limited, right? At the starting portion, you want to prove that the product is working a little bit, and then you get your VC support, or however you're trying to do that. And so you might want to go with a smaller solution and then go to a larger solution. I'm sure what I'm saying is probably all common sense, right? You might already know this, but from just my experience of when we were looking into different solutions, what we try to look at is what I'm trying to share.
Yeah. Parth, what we can do, maybe I'll ask Saurabh to introduce himself. He just joined.
Okay. One more person joined.
Yeah. And then maybe we can go with specific questions that people may have. I know.
Sure.
Yeah, Saurabh.
Yeah, thanks, Naren. Hi, Parth.
Hi.
I'm Saurabh. I'm part of a startup called Translatal Biosystems. And I'll just about a bit of my background. I'm actually a bioinformatics researcher. I did my PhD, but on the academic side, of course. And now I actually handle, the data analysis and the bioinformatics analysis part as part of Translatal. Now, one of the big differences that I realized transitioning from the, purely kind of academic research to this kind of thing is that because we are going to be customer facing, I realized that the processes and the code and our pipelines have to be much more robust and reproducible and kind of immune to any kind of shocks or changes happening in the back end. So from that point of view, are there any things that you can share that work at companies like yours or maybe the previous one?
This is for data analysis, and then what is the next question? I didn't understand.
Yeah, so bioinformatics or other kind of data analysis. But basically what happens is there are, a lot of dependencies, and then how do we maintain the code that we write and the data required to execute that code, etc. So are there any best practices that you can share that are followed at the larger companies?
I understood what you're asking. Yeah, the code development, that area I'm not very familiar. Okay. But first of all, I want to tell you that first I read your name as Saurabh Transalatale. I thought it's a Marathi last name. And then I realized it's really not a Marathi last name. Like Apte, and then I understood. Yeah, I understood it's actually a company name. So,
company name.
Anyways, so I have seen people, use any kind of program language to, do that programs, and then they store within. But I can find out and let you know how they actually store that codes and all that. I have not dealt with that till now, so I can find that out and let you know, right?
Sure. Yeah. And also another question, this is more on the experimental data side, which, also we need to store, etc. So, and you suggested, of course, I mean, we are already, part of some of the cloud storage like Google and Amazon, etc. So are there any, like what kind of precautions do you take to, make sure that if one of them kind of fails, then, you still have access to what is required and so on? And is it even, I mean, does it happen with that, uh, at any, let's say, appreciable frequency, like these kind of issues?
I mean, if you're going with big companies like Amazon or Google or Microsoft, they always have a mirroring solution. So whatever data that you store on their servers, they automatically have a backup for it at a different location. Those are all big companies, so they will always look for. They've always invested. You can ask that question as well when you're actually choosing the vendor.
Right.
Business continuity plan. So what is for a business continuity in terms of, say, if I'm sure they're, if for them they're offering a cloud service, that means but they are storing in some server somewhere, right? So they'll probably store it in Seattle and then they'll store it in Guatemala. So I'm just giving an example. So two different locations, or India and the US or something like that, so that it will be mirrored. So exact mirror will happen, and then so that any of the data that you have doesn't get lost. So that is typical, that they offer, but you can double check with them if there is an extra cost or anything like that for that.
Okay.
That is typically offered.
And I'll ask Shweta to introduce herself. I think Shweta, she's working on mRNA vaccines.
Hi, Shweta.
Hello, hi. I'm sorry I joined in late. I just got back home, so I just thought I'd join in for however long I could. So a little bit about what I do is I work on mRNA vaccine platforms. Right now we are looking at dengue, and Naren has been really extremely helpful in providing some sort of mentorship support, putting me in touch with people who could actually help me take this idea forward. So that's great. And I'm really happy to hear more from you. I just joined here, so I'm still waiting to get more inputs from you.
Right. So Shweta,
Thank you.
I think our conversation, was one of the main instigators of me calling Parth to this meeting. So you specifically had a question about all the data that you're generating and the security aspects of it, and how you're going to share it with the companies that you're potentially collaborating with, right? Was that a question that you had?
Yes. So sometimes you want, like if you're working on some sort of a data problem, big data, you do not want to lose that information, right? So I understand from your mirroring and all of those aspects are important there. Now, if I want to engage with the industry and I'm sharing critical information, I want it to be very secure. I want it to be available only to certain people and not be accessible all the time. And if I do not want to share it beyond a certain point, how is it possible for me to restrict access? Is there a possibility at all?
So you're talking about like in Instagram expiring photos.
Something like that. Yes.
Correct. Something like that. You want to share something and then it destructs itself.
Yes.
I've not heard about that in cloud services as well. It's a good. Recently, WhatsApp has come up with some, these messages that will go off in 24 hours, right? So maybe how do you share these information? By email, or how do you share currently?
Yeah, so right now, if I share it by email, one thing is I do not know if how many times it is being accessed and by whom, right? They could further, whoever receives it can share that email again, and there's no way for me to really control it. Is there a way? I'm not aware.
Even if you share, even if you don't share by email and then say you share it on a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting or something, you can still take screenshots, and then you can still, so people that you share, do you sign any confidentiality agreements or something like that?
Yes, we do sign CDAs, but let us say we are thinking of working together right now, but for whatever reason, it doesn't pan out.
That should all be in the agreement itself. So, see, expiring documents through email has not come out yet, right? Within a matter of few minutes or something, you can recall the email that happens, until the person reads. Sometimes I have noticed that even on Outlook, say for example, HR sends an email, and if they, because it is from HR, HR has able to repeal that email also. Even after I've read that email, suddenly that email disappears. And then, so there is a facility of pulling back the email. I can...
Including the attachments and everything?
Exactly, the whole email. So, but if I've already downloaded the attachment, you can't do anything. But that recently happened actually for me. So they'd actually sent some announcement, and I was reading the announcement, and suddenly the announcement, I closed that, and then I was looking at some other email and going back, and the announcement vanished. So I didn't delete. I checked, and then I found out they, repealed that. Other person, they said, oh, that also they also lost that email. So there is some way of pulling back your email, but I think in your case, I would suggest first strengthening your confidentiality agreement, and whatever you share, obviously you'll have some basic trust to share, but that data should be given back to you, if and not to be used. So that's all. I think it's still works on some trust and agreements. But I'll if I come to know that there is a way of expiring emails, I'll surely update you. I'll find out.
One is...
May I add something here? Sorry, Shweta. The one way we use, and this is one problem that you have, especially with government agencies, where you are exchanging some data or some files which are confidential, but you can't sign confidentiality clauses. The one way we have done in past is you use OneDrive or something, and you make the file non-downloadable, so you can't download it. You can put a confidential on that. So if they take a screenshot or something, they can't remove confidential on that. And second, what you can do is the link can expire after a day or something, or if you want to give them only for 2 days, you give them the link, so they're only going to see it, okay? And that is one way that you can prevent any downloading from their side. And once the link expires, they will not be able to access it. Yeah, but the screenshot part, you have to figure, like as Parth mentioned, for that there is nothing. But yeah, that's the best thing we have found till date.
No, my other question was, like all of us are in some sense big grantees, right? And we share a lot of confidential information to, say, an incubator like CCamp. We don't really sign any confidentiality agreement. A lot of the people who come to our panels, our discussions, our mentorship sessions, all of that, we've really not signed anything, right? So how does one find ways to, just safeguard ideas?
There are some, even on Teams, if you go to the apps section on Teams, okay, even when you work on Teams, there's several apps. Like they allow some apps in Microsoft allows you to collaborate, using file shares and all that. So have you tried any of those?
Some of them, yes.
Okay, because there is something called eShare, trusted sharing, where allows external file sharing via eShare to be initiated, and things. There are several file sharing options through Teams as well. Once the Teams has come out with a lot of apps, Now even Power BI has become also, like, how dashboards are created and all that. It's become a, app through Microsoft. It's actually very good. So why don't you try some of those as well, and then see if that suits your purpose? Because if it is on the server, then you can have that limited access password protection, and you can delete it from the server if you're, providing it access from your server. But if
Got
they, and you can make it non-downloadable, like what Vaibhav suggested.
Yeah. No, even I think Google Drive also has many of these options. I just wanted to know if there are other secure options for me, apart from Drive or Teams.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, you guys.
It's a question for all of us. I think, one of the things, how does one, okay, Chitra, bye. Go ahead, Chitra, ask a question about quality, right? She has to leave.
Hi, sorry, I wanted to ask you, given that quality is so expensive, how do you justify or advocate for that in a relatively new ecosystem like the IVD space in India for infectious diseases right now, where the idea of quality, the idea of having a quality management system may be critical, but the regulator hasn't really caught on to it yet. It's still very nascent. How do you advocate this to new manufacturers who only see this as an added cost? Yeah.
They don't pay me that well. I'm still cheap only. Why do you say quality is expensive? So, but yeah, I mean, initially, you can start with paper-based solutions, right? I mean, so then it is not that expensive. Digital solutions maybe, but it's a one-time investment. But if you're talking about whether the practices, the good manufacturing practices, all that come under quality, right? So there are different levels of, practices at the clinical stage versus commercial stage, and when you go forward. So the basic quality is, it's very simple. The data that you have needs to be peer reviewed, right? So that it's, the data is, what do I say, trustworthy, right? In simple terms. So that is what really matters. And then if you talk about, say, for example, failures, right? When you run a experiment, you have a failure. It is up to, for knowledge management purposes, see the deviations system that currently exists, or the change control system that currently exists, or the corrective action, preventive action currently exists, that is through the electronic quality management system. It's all about knowledge management. Because if a similar deviation happens later, compliance comes later. It's, if you really see the basic, underlying theme, it's about knowledge management. Because if I do a deviation today, I don't want Vaibhav to, create the same deviation tomorrow. That is the reason for documenting. So if you market it from that angle of knowledge management, and say if Chitra leaves the company and Shweta joins, Shweta should know, some basic, what happened before. So from that angle, you should be able to market it. Compliance, I know people will, especially in startups, or where they'll say, we will take care of it later, I don't want to pinpoint or stereotype, especially in India or especially in China or something like that. But what I'm trying to say is the mindset it'll be about costs. I'm going to invest in this, I'm going to invest in that, and then do I really get a return on investment for those? So that, obviously, quality management system is a cost. It's but you should also look at cost of poor quality. So if you keep on doing the same mistake again and again, and then if you don't correct it, or if you don't have a track of it or a monitoring and learnings and benefit out of it, then you will again, it'll add to your cost even more later.
Yeah.
Right? The corrective and preventive action system, the CAPA system, that is also again to track, right? You implement a corrective action, and then you also implement a preventive action, what is called a mistake proofing action. So you don't have that same mistake again. But In case you do have a similar mistake, you will be able to go back and see, oh, we had this mistake before, but we didn't, evaluate it fully to, implement a solution, or there is another way, this mistake happens. So all of these tools only help you for knowledge management. If you ask me, from a quality, any angle.
Thank you. That's a really useful framework to think about it. Thanks for that.
Otherwise, people don't understand quality. They think I charge too much, but Naren knows.
Yeah, I think coming to charge, and we've talked a lot about cost. I think it might be useful, and maybe we can do it offline with you. But if at the end of today's call, if we can put what a startup should consider, how much cost should a startup consider to put into, let's say, putting a quality management system, whether it is documentation quality, quality of a review and audit system, security system, cloud system. Like, what would be the approximate cost? I know you can't generalize across all the different startups, but is it going to be 10 lakhs a year? Just put a ballpark so that people have an idea of what that actual cost may be, and what are the factors to consider.
It's again, the number of licenses is where it will come to if you go to a vendor. Okay, the cloud services, of course, data storage, your hardware, I'll call it a hardware because either you buy it here or you use somebody else's hardware. The hardware cost depends on the amount of data that you incur. So initially, you might have a bonus amount of data, but ongoing, you generate, on and on. But the initial solution cost, there might be a fixed cost associated to it. Based on the vendor, things will change. But the licensing cost is kind of the main cost that comes into. How many licenses do you want to take? I know some companies go with very limited number of licenses, 1 or 2 or even 10 or even, maximum, depends on the company size. And so that you do concurrent licenses, all that's what I mentioned in the beginning, you have to negotiate that portion. Can they give concurrent licenses so that multiple people can use the same license? That's where costs will come. I don't have the current cost structure. It has been a couple of years in terms of costs, and different vendors often offer different things. But I can find out. I have contacts, and I can find out how much it costs and all that.
Yeah.
And it depends on the solution. If you're looking for electronic lab notebook kind of solution, to again that comes to knowledge management, right? And compliance, of course, but knowledge management is the key there also.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I can find out, Naren. I don't have it on top of my head how many. Yeah.
Maybe what I'd love to work with you maybe and share it with everyone else. What a template of, what are the kind of, we can put the cost later, but what are the 5 or 6 or 10 things that people have to think about that you must have, right? A cloud, maybe you need or don't need an electronic notebook, or at this stage, and so, because they have a limited amount, everyone has limited amount of funds right now.
Correct.
And what do you want to spend on? But as you and I probably know, the main thing in an organization is building a culture of quality and data management, right? And so by implementing a digital system, you're forced to standardize things, because if you're not standardized, you can't digitize.
Correct.
So anyway, we'll talk about that later.
So that is a very good point that Naren brought about standardization, because everybody will store it in a different way. But when you templatize it, through an electronic lab notebook, or even when you write a deviation, everybody will write, 100 different ways. So when you templatize it using a quality management system, there's a lot of standardization that happens, obviously. And it'll help, standardization, Chitra, is also a very important, aspect of, the management systems that you want to talk about. It's about standardization, knowledge management, and also retrieval of data. Knowledge management retrieval comes into knowledge management again, but again, easy retrieval, archival, and all that will come into picture as well.
Okay. Saurabh.
She had logged off, looks like, yeah.
Yeah.
Vaibhav, you are saying
No,
something?
no, sorry, I did hear you. Yeah, thanks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My question was regarding the learning curve, and I believe I am zero in ELN part. The only one I've seen in my life is the one that Narendra shared with me, Ravi shared with me initially, and I had a look of it. Learning curve is one thing, and especially teaching other kids how to writing the notebook itself is very difficult, properly. And getting them on ELN is gonna be another, and especially when I don't know, getting it there, what is the best system to do it. So in your experience, you mentioned few like Caliber, Viva, Laboratory Information System and all. Which of them you thought has the best learning curve, like fastest learning curve?
I think Labware is pretty simple to learn. Okay, Labware, I think they have a pretty simple system. Especially when you go if you customize less, then learning is easier. Because more you customize, their solution, more learning will be harder. Because they will have to, of course, program things, and then there will be multiple steps that you introduce. Customization also costs more. So when you initially go with, because they will have standard templates which is being used by multiple companies, and you have a point that learning curve is there in any system, but nowadays they made it very user friendly. It's very simple. Like how nowadays even if they come up with a newer version of Excel or Word, we pretty much know we don't need to go through an Excel course, to find out where the keys are. They do. It's annoying a little bit that they do change sometimes here and there, but I think they offer there are a lot of YouTube courses also, and they also offer help to initially. It's called a hand-holding phase. They do hypercare. That's what they call it. Yeah.
My second small question is regarding the safety of the data. So if I'm just comparing it, imagine I have a notebook. The add-on safety is I have a lock and an almirah, so I can put the book in the almirah. Now, do you think ELN requires some other features like I can think of it's a good idea to have a desktop which is only for the lab, not that everybody can open on any laptop. And there could be additional softwares which can track if the data has to be downloadable or uploadable or whatever. So are there things that you do? Because I remember Naren mentioned this long back in Delhi only, that we talked about that digitization of Biocon took a lot of money. And I believe a lot of hardware was also a part of it. So can you tell me about hardware part and other maybe softwares required in parallel to ELN to be making it more useful?
See, so that's why I mentioned about two solutions. One is on-premise solution, and the other one is a cloud-based solution that the cloud services were not very fond of, because it's about protecting data. It is going into somebody else's server, so there is a kind of trust, what will happen. But they offer data encryption while transferring data and all that. Like how WhatsApp says, no, everything is encrypted. We also don't know what is happening in your WhatsApp. So kind of they do all that, data encryption, but still, then you might want to go to, there's actually, Naren, I met somebody, in the last, when we were in Goa, right? Goa, no. So there, somebody was offering, not Anurag Rathod, there was one more person who was offering data storage as well for manufacturing data and analytics together. I forgot his name. He was working at DRL before. So, and then he started his own company. Not clicking, the name is not clicking, but I'll find out. So he was offering storage, for especially for small companies, data storage and all that. But again, coming back to your point, it will be password protected, right, Vaibhav? If you have a ELN system and then only some people can access. So that way you can also control the, the amount of licenses you have, because what you have is as a startup means it's a very sensitive data. right? Anybody can take your idea and then start their own company, at that stage. So, so that data protection you'll have to control through password, number of licenses, the people that you trust, should really have those licenses, kind of thing. Only then it will work.
And do you think when we are signing these legal agreements, so we are a very horizontal startup and we interact with multiple universities, and data traceability is an issue. That's one of the reasons why we are not able to use these cheaper services offered by university. And we have to go to some CRO. Now, my question is, especially when you are working on a ELN based thing, do you think that there could be an extra phrase on your confidentiality part or some legal agreement that we mention this thing there in legally, or you don't have to mention that on the paper, something?
But I think when your data, the data that you create is in ELN, right? They are not creating in ELN.
No, because as you mentioned, no, we at the end every startup is dependent on other labs. We hardly create 20%, 30% data of our own. 70 to 80% come from outside, and
Understood.
they are creating. The idea is we have a same system like a ELN, and we give access to them. They should be able to upload that data, and it should be maintained under confidentiality. Now, yes, we have a CDA signed with them, but I want to make sure that, I'm just asking here that when we sign a collaboration agreement or IP exchange agreements, there we mention this ELN system. People do that on the paper.
Yeah, you should mention any digital system, maybe in a general frame. Access provided to any digital system should be maintained confidentially and all that. That you should probably mention. Because if you are actually owning their license and you're giving them a license for them to input, and they can download that app, on their laptop or a web-based service, they can just log into and then enter the password and then do that. You should put that in your service agreement for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Because they are able to now access data remotely, right?
Right. Absolutely right.
So it has to be there. Yeah. You can add a section for digital data, clause, especially. So there you can data security as a kind of clause.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
but good questions though. I mean, you guys have to deal with not only science but also non-scientific stuff.
Sometimes it is more of that, no?
Yeah, I actually want to ask one question. Maybe it's in the category of how can you even ask, but as small startups, and maybe the others can also comment. There's a lot of let's say experimental or other work to do, and so a lot of these things feel like more and more things to do, and somehow they get kind of deprioritized. Like that's at least been my kind of experience. So is that an issue at other places or maybe with other people? And then how do you ensure that this is really taken seriously and maintained, like all these frameworks?
I mean, the electronic solutions you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, if you, as a company, within your company, you're talking about, right? That they take seriously.
Yeah. And I think this really is about small.
It's about change management. Let me tell you, it's about change management. Initially, there will be a lot of resistance, like Vaibhav mentioned, right? People don't want that solution. They'll tell Vaibhav, come on, Vaibhav, I'm writing in a notebook and I'm doing it very simply. Why do you want to complicate my life in making me input into something? And then Vaibhav will also tell him that, while we, get familiar with the electronic system, do it on paper also. So you'll be doing dual system for some time. So obviously the initial portion of change management is an uphill task. But again, I can tell you the pros and cons, when compared to Biocon, where you have to deal that with thousands of, employees, you will be dealing with tens of employees, right, at a startup. So it's much easier. Right. And in Biocon also, the way we do is we go product by product, lab by lab. We take it one step at a time. You do a pilot for a certain portion of the data. or certain product, if you're working on multiple products, just one product, you start doing it. And so slowly you build, and then don't think of doing everything at the same time. So always in companies, we start with a pilot program first. And then once that pilot program, because we are trying to put in, there will be some, like I said, avoid customization, but sometimes you may not be able to avoid customization. You might want to put some certain, workflows that is beneficial for you. So in the electronic system, so then you do it one product at a time, and then see, and then from those learnings, you can make it better for the next product and the next version of the rollout, and all of those you can do. So you minimize, input, and then compare. If this electronic, way of doing things is more complicated than paper way of doing things at your stage of the company, then you should stick with the paper way of doing things for some time at least, until you get stability in your data and the next steps for VC funding and all that happens. And you can take it at the next step. It has to have a proper plan for sure in terms of financial planning. A lot of, we enter science, but as a business, because I used to own a business before. So as a business, financial planning is something that becomes very key. Which as a scientist, and I might not be very good at. That is where your MBA finance friend will help you a lot.
Yeah. yeah. No, great. No, but thank you for that tip. I think, that starting with a smaller scope, I think that makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, it's overwhelming. Thank you.
Anytime.
Maybe I'll add a quick note to that. One of the things that I have been, because of working in industry, documentation is very, very critical. And we realize that during the audits and all that. So, the phrase there is, if you've not written it, it's not done, right? And it doesn't matter so much maybe at this early stage. FDA is not going to come looking at what you've done, etc. But I think it's just good practice to have. So I'll just give you an example of how, all of us are used to this from our PhD days. You write the protocol, you write the method, and then you do the experiment, you write the results, and maybe a small interpretation. In every notebook, you write that, right? And we are used to that, but maybe, people in the lab today are not that much used to it. So when we were developing the software in our company, this is where it comes. The culture of digitization or whatever has to come from the leadership. It is never grassroots. Unless the top-down approach is used, no one is going to follow it, and you can't take no for an answer. So when I joined the company, I said that you must, for every software that you write, you must have a concept document of why you want to do why you want to have it. You have to have a URS, which is the user requirements. You have to have the FRS, which is the functional requirement. You have to have a testing plan, user acceptance testing plan. You have to actually develop the testing data set that you need to do. Finally, test the system, and finally write a report of all of this and have a document demonstrating that you've actually done all of this. And we are also a startup, and all the software guys says, "Main software likhu ya tumhara document likhu." But I said, doesn't have to be a detailed book about FRS. Even if you write bullet points, is good enough for the beginning. You can always expand later, but it's important to document. It also allows continuity, like Parth was saying, somebody leaves, somebody else comes, you can pick up somewhere. So this culture of documentation is very, very important. And I spoke about standardization, right? Digitization is not going to help you standardize. If you standardize, then digitization will happen.
Exactly. The workflows you use. And then I think Naren brought up a very important point. Doing the basic documentation, right? And then he brought up a very important point of user requirements. So again, every company will have a different requirement. Every data set will have a different requirement. That's why when you asked about coding, storage, I have not dealt with it yet. So I said, I don't know, because I don't know the user requirements of that coding storage. So user requirements are very critical in terms of data. It goes down to the units of the data as well. how, to label and how to store, and, then you have to pull it, and then you have to understand the data and all that. So you have to really have a solid user requirement written. First of all, think through. There should be templates available online, user requirements and all that, so that you can interpret, and then you can delete the stuff that is not required. And then you can create a user, and then you talk to the vendor, because the vendor will first ask, what's your requirement in terms of data.
We live in a great time of software being very sophisticated now. I'm sure generative AI and natural language processing and all that AI kind of stuff is going to become standard practice in the next couple of years for all of these systems. So there might be a chat GPT like system, and you might just say keywords saying, my reagent is XYZ, and I've got this cell line, and I've got this cell culture, and I'm going to transduction and plasmid, and please write a method for this, and it will write it for you.
No, I'm sure it already does, Naren. Today, it was so coincidentally some AI, you just give a one-line topic, that I wanted to, my internet connection is unstable. That's what it says.
Yeah, so, we lost you for a minute, but we can hear you now.
Yeah. So basically, if I write in chat, presentation creator AI, how to stabilize internet connection, it will give you a 5-6 page PowerPoint about that stabilizing internet connection.
Exactly.
It's very interesting.
So I think, but the habit of making it a habit into writing down what you're doing is going to be the key. And then you can use ChatGPT kind of functions to make life a little bit simpler. Saurabh, you were saying something, and then maybe even make that last question. We're on the top of the hour.
No, I was just making a comment that because I teach at the university, I think students are already very good at this. They give these keywords and
but these are very scary thoughts, because just autocorrection is making life hell. Now imagine ethidium bromide becomes something else by autocorrection or something. And recently I wrote to a girl who was on LinkedIn. She open to work. She has all the qualities I'm looking for. I said, "Are you open to a position still?" And I didn't realize she said poster ? And then I was like, "What is poster?" I opened. It was already autocorrected to, "Are you open to a poster?" And it took me 1 minute to realize, okay, autocorrection has happened. Then now I'm thinking about if ELN has autocorrection only, it could be a hell, and a chat GPT and people, things like coming in. And the guy who's writing could say, "I didn't write it," because at the end it's a responsibility, right? We are sharing with ELN is what exactly you typed or what you wrote, the number. So
no, yesterday I was writing an email, and it was to an English guy, in Britain. And I've written I'm saying I'm using this email as a confirmation for, the wordings that is being used. I'm going to use this kind of thing because I didn't get a response. And instead of confirmation, some autocorrection, it changed it as conformation. And now I'm thinking this guy will, think that I don't know English. I'm writing.
Exactly.
And imagine FDA has that note in the hand. The confirmation of the protein was same, but it is a different confirmation now.
No, actually, this is, I feel like, we can't avoid it. It's coming. So we just need to figure out how to use it to our advantage. All right, Parth, thank you so much for coming late at night like this and coming and chatting with us. And all of you guys, you're amazing. I was always skeptical whether some of you will join these sessions, but thank you so much. This has been amazing.
It's been a great session. Thank you.
No, thanks to you for organizing this, and thanks, Parth, for coming. Really enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you.
We will disturb you more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can get all of us get connected on LinkedIn or WhatsApp or something.
Yeah. But Parth, I think let's take a little bit of an action item from this and make a template of what a startup should consider as a digitization strategy.
Sure. I'll work on it, Naren, and then we'll catch up with the team again.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.